We all have faith in something. We all believe in something. And when we get in trouble in our life, or we get in situations or conditions that are challenging, we naturally do something very unique. The first thing we do is we don't want to see anybody. We don't want to go anywhere. We don't want to do anything. What we do is we disconnect from our external environment. And then we set our body down, and we're no longer interacting and moving. And when we set our body down, we're saying then that we want to be greater than our body. And we start going within, and we start working on selecting a new, possible future, which, by the way, already exists in the quantum field. And when the frontal lobe begins to think about what it wants, when we start to ask frontal lobe questions like, what would it be like to be healed? What would it be like for this condition to change? What do I want in my future? The frontal lobe is like a great symphony leader, and it has connections to all other parts of the brain. And when we're truly focused and we're truly paying attention, the frontal lobe begins to, like a great symphony leader, begins to select different networks of neurons that are connected to the things we've learned intellectually, knowledge, and experiences that we've had throughout our lives. And as it begins to call up these different neural networks, it begins to seamlessly piece them together to create a vision or a picture, an internal representation. And that's called intention. Now, this is where it gets tricky, because intention does nothing except begin to organize a new level of mind. But when you combine that clear intention with an elevated emotion, it's the combination of a clear intention and an elevated emotion that begins to move the brain and body out of the past and begin to change the brain and body to live in the future. Which means then you have to teach your body emotionally what that future is going to feel like before it's made manifest. That means then you don't wait for your wealth to show up to feel abundance. You don't wait for your success to feel empowerment. You don't wait for your healing to feel wholeness. You don't wait for your new relationship to feel love. You don't wait for the mystical moment to feel awe. You actually create the feeling along with the intention of wholeness, and that's what begins to create the healing. You actually create the emotion of abundance, and that's what begins to bring your wealth. You begin to teach your body emotionally what the moment of awe feels like, so the mystical moment is present. We begin to teach our body what empowerment feels like before our experience. And when we do this properly, what we're really doing is we're changing the brain and body on a biological level. The end result of that begins to organize events in our life that are equal to that state of being. So we don't pray to have our prayers answered. With faith, we get up as if our prayers are already answered. Your brain is organized to reflect everything you know in your life. Your brain is a record of the past. It's an artifact. It's a reflection of everything you've learned and experienced to this moment. Now, thoughts are the language of the brain, but feelings are the language of the body. And so then, if you're feeling the same way every single day, then it means two things. Nothing new is happening in your life. And if those feelings are driving your thoughts, in other words, you can't think greater than how you feel, and for the most part, your brain and body are both in the past. Now, this is where it gets tricky, because most people, when they pray, they're not altered in any way biologically. They don't feel a shift in their energy. But if you truly then marry a clear intention with an elevated emotion, now you begin to change the circuitry in your brain to no longer exist in the past. If you do this properly, your brain will begin to look like the experience has already occurred. We can change our brain just by thinking differently. So now the brain now is a map to the future. And if we can combine that intention with an elevated emotion, the elevated emotion then begins to select new genes in new ways so that the body begins to change, because the body is the unconscious mind, is believing it's living in that future reality in the present moment, doesn't know the difference between a real experience that creates an emotion and an emotion that you can fabricate by thought alone. And so it is the combination of those two things then that begins to change the brain and body to look like the experience has already happened. And if the experience biologically looks like it already happens, then hang on, the event is going to find you. We will only accept, believe, and surrender to the thoughts equal to our emotional state. And we will not accept, believe, and surrender to any thoughts that aren't equal to our emotional state. So you can do all the affirmations you want, and you can say, I'm abundant, I'm healthy, I'm wealthy. I'm in love, I got a new relationship. But if you're feeling unworthy, if you're feeling lack, if you're feeling insecure, that's mind and body in opposition. So the biggest challenge, if feelings are the language of the body, if we can't think greater than how we feel, and we're feeling familiar feelings every single day, then we're literally thinking in the past. So to change then, to truly have a shift, is to think greater than how you feel. Because when you change how you feel, and you feel gratitude as an example, the emotional signature of gratitude means the event has already happened. And the longer you linger in gratitude, the more your body believes the event has already occurred. So now it is that state of gratitude then that begins to, in a sense, the body begins to believe it's happening in the moment, because gratitude is the ultimate state of receivership. So then when we bring those two together, then the brain and body begin to shift on a biological level. This is the fundamental point in what it takes to be a spiritual person, because if you understand that those emotions that are connected to the stress hormones of survival, of anger and aggression and hostility and violence and pain and suffering and guilt and shame and unworthiness and fear and anxiety and hopelessness, all those emotions are all created by the hormones of stress, and those are all connected to experiences that we've already had. So there's nothing wrong with having an emotional reaction. The question is, how long are you going to live by that emotion? Because the longer you live in that emotional state, your body, as the unconscious mind, is believing it's in the same conditions, the same experiences in your life 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The body literally is living in the past. So when people begin to understand this, and they begin to understand that those very chemicals begin to downregulate genes that create disease, when people begin to realize this, then they start to say, well, God, let me become aware of how I'm thinking. Let me notice how I'm acting. Let me pay attention to how I'm feeling. And let's decide if these thoughts or emotions or behaviors belong in my future. Now the person's becoming way more involved in their own understanding of managing their energy and managing their internal world. In the last 2 years, 2.5 years, we have done so many biological and neurological and research studies on common people doing the uncommon. We've mapped over 1,500 brains in meditation. We've had people wear heart rate monitors. We've measured the energy of the room. We've measured the energy around their bodies. We've measured the energy centers of their bodies. We've measured epigenetic changes in their saliva and in their urine. And I can tell you that without a doubt, that you and I and everybody in that audience is at their absolute best when they get beyond themselves. That truly, when you go inward, if you do it properly, there will come a moment where you will become nobody. You'll become no one, no thing, nowhere, in no time. The moment you disconnect from your body, your environment, and time, you forget about your identity. That's the moment you're pure consciousness. And that's the moment that your consciousness begins to merge with a greater consciousness. And we have to continuously give up an aspect of the limited self to join the greater self. And when there is that merging of subjective consciousness with objective consciousness, that's when we become more like it. That's when we begin to take on its nature. And we've seen people do this over and over again. And the brain and the heart gets so synchronized, it gets so organized, that the field around the body that we measure sometimes increases by up to 10 feet. And now the person feels more like energy and less like matter, more like wave and less like particle, and they feel connected to something greater, and they trust in possibility, and they step out into the unknown. And we have all the machinery to do this. I think people are beginning around the world to wake up to the idea that the illusion is becoming so obvious. I mean, every single paradigm right now is collapsing, whether it's the political model, the economic model, the religious model, the medical model, the educational model, the environment. Everything's collapsing right now because it cannot function on the old laws, the old paradigms. Something new has to be created. So then, how do we begin to become supernatural? We have to begin to do what's unnatural. And when everybody else is in lack and in poverty, that is the time to give. When everybody else is in fear and worried, that's the time to demonstrate courage. When everybody else is judging and warring, that's the time to show love and compassion. And if we keep doing the unnaturals long enough, sooner or later we'll begin to become supernatural. So our soul's journey then is to really to step out of the quagmire and the limited beliefs and perceptions that keep us playing in this limited realm, this limited density, where we are matter trying to change matter. Once we get a taste of the divine, and that divine, again, we've measured this over and over again. When you are that thought in that infinite space, when the brain is perceiving space and no longer perceiving objects, it gets very organized. It gets very coherent. And when the brain gets coherent, we get coherent. When the heart gets coherent, we love way more. And that's when we begin to emulate the divine. So over and over again, as we begin to climb out of these limited states, and we break free from those survival emotions that keep us feeling more like matter and less like energy, the side effect of all of that is becoming more energy and less matter. And that's when we start to demonstrate being a vibrational being. The field around our bodies when we're living in stress is about 3-4 inches in size. Open your heart, it can be up to 9 meters wide. We measured. And so then when you begin to open your heart, you feel connected to something greater. That's the beginning. That's when the soul says, now I have infinite possibilities to experience, and I get to select as a free-willed individual where I want to place my attention. That's when we're liberated. So I think it's a great time for us to begin to really embody this information. I think it's a great time for us to hit the low points, to see those illusions. I mean, I had my own awakening, and you reach a point where you realize that the only time that you feel like yourself is you need the external world to remind you of it. That's a sign. When you can find an identity of yourself in the quietness and solitude of your own presence, that's when you're no longer seduced by the external world, and that's when you begin to experience true freedom. If you truly were interested in transformation, and you believe that your personality created your personal reality, you may start off, number one, asking yourself when you wake up in the morning, number one, what is the greatest expression of myself that I can present to the world? Ask yourself that question. Then the second question you should ask is, what thoughts do you not want to think? What behaviors do you want to be aware of that you're not going to demonstrate? Complaining, blaming, making excuses, feeling sorry for yourself, talking about other people, whatever. What emotions you no longer want to live by? And I just want people to review those states of mind and body so that they are Gandalf on the bridge. And if they can become familiar with them, they're less likely to go unconscious during their day. They won't slip by their awareness, program their autonomic nervous system into a destiny. Then if you said, who do I want to be when I open my eyes? Number three, what thoughts do I want to believe in today? What do I want to put my attention, my energy behind? Can I rehearse mentally the actions I'm going to demonstrate? If you mentally rehearse them, you're installing the circuits in your brain. Can you teach your body emotionally what that future is going to feel like before it's made manifest? And if you ask yourself the question or make the statement, I am not getting up from this meditation until I am somebody else. Now we're talking about greatness, because in order for you to get up as someone else, you have to overcome the old self. And if we do that properly, then your job is to maintain that modified state of mind and body your entire day. And if you can, get ready, because something unusual is going to show up in your life. That's the law.